Hi class, I'm going to be talking to you about Underprivileged Deviance, which is chapter 15. There are numerous myths and misconceptions about robbery, including the notion that robbery is an innately violent crime, that burglars enjoy the fear that victims express when threatened by a weapon such as a gun, that unarmed robbers are actually less dangerous than armed robbers, and that bank robberies occur frequently. There are two aspects to consider when analyzing crime. First is, robbery is a property crime, which consists of a rational decision-making process that involves three elements. The first is deciding to rob for financial gain, i.e. money. Although a lot of psychiatrists tend to typify armed burglars as feeling inadequate and weak, which then leads them to crime, the primary motive is simply financial gain. Second, deciding which target to rob and taking two factors into consideration. The first is choosing an establishment that is lucrative and will probably have cash on site. The second is deciding and choosing a lower risk target, meaning lower risk of getting arrested. And the third element is deciding how they're going to rob their victims. Although only 1 in 4 robberies end in arrest, there are varying degrees of planning before a robbery is committed. On one end of the spectrum, highly professionalized robbers take care and plan meticulously, while on the other end of the spectrum, amateurs might feel a sudden need for cash and commit a robbery quite suddenly and unplanned. Second, robbery as a violent crime. In the instances in which robbers are unarmed, the likelihood of actual violence increases in an attempt to subdue the victim, which of course leads to higher rates of injury in said unarmed robberies. In the case of an armed robbery, however, the threat of potential violence provides a buffer zone between the robber and the victim, intimidates the victim, and allows robbers to follow through with threats by hitting or injuring the victim in other ways than shooting them. All of this in mind, there are other observable patterns of robbery as well. Mostly involving strangers, robberies are committed in more densely populated and urban cities simply for the opportunities that are presented. Factors such as people carrying more cash, staying home due to weather, stores being left unsupervised, and financial stress around holidays are all opportunities that burglars take into consideration, which leaves the winter and colder months as the times when robberies are most often committed. As mentioned before, there are two types of robbers who are committing these crimes. Amateur robbers, who are generally young people who commit robbery for small sums of money. These people can be divided into three types. Opportunist robbers, which makes up the majority, are often found in groups and rarely carrying firearms, who tend to target individuals, and their crimes might include, or crime victims might include, older women with purses, drunks, cab drivers, or people who are noticeably vulnerable or in an unfavorable position, such as walking alone in a dark alley at night. Addict robbers who are looking for their next fix and target victims like drug dealers who have cash on hand, or even white people who are less likely to offer resistance than black people, and alcoholic robbers who are not the most intentional and are most likely to get caught. Professional robbers, however, are categorized in two ways. As the first type, the criminal who's made the career off of robbery and who is highly skilled and technical. They often leave the country for a while after committing a burglary while living lavish lives of luxury in hiding. The second type is the criminal who is also highly professional, but who robbery is not a means to an end for them, simply a skill they need to learn for the other crimes that they are involved in. There are two positivist theories for why people commit these crimes at all. First is the relative deprivation theory. Established by John Conklin when the average socioeconomic level of Americans was increasing, his theory was that even though socioeconomic factors were getting better for a group, that the lowest and least affected by these changes within that group would feel deprived and turn to crime in order to compensate for their deprivation. Second is the theory of economic abundance, which Leroy Gold used to expand on relative deprivation theory. Gold explains economic abundance by saying, increases in the amount of property or possessions would serve to increase relative deprivation of those who are still not sharing in the ownership of property or possessions, while at the same time making it easier for those people to steal the property for their own use. This can be triggered by feelings of inadequacy and jealousy that prompt robbery of items like money, jewelry, and new phones. With modernity stepping in to protect people and their possessions, theft prevention systems in automobiles are largely attributed as a major factor in why auto theft has declined by over 40% in the last 30 years. The goals of auto thieves now are typically to steal cars in order to make a quick profit that results in 700,000 thefts per year and $4.9 billion in losses, effectively making the new auto theft industry a big business game. Whether for upper or lower class individuals, the motivation behind auto theft is much the same: monetary gain. While monetary gain is a great motivator for just about everyone in society, for auto theft, factors such as inadequate law enforcement, profitability, and an abundance of opportunity also lead people to commit auto theft. Although modern technologies and anti-theft protection systems in cars prevent theft, it also encourages theft because those vehicles are worth more and they offer more profit, but that just forces burglars to change their tactics behind acquiring the vehicle. In these scenarios, techniques such as commandeering vehicles at highway rest stops, gas stations, fast food outlets, car washes, red lights, and shopping mall parking lots. Much like auto theft, burglary rates have gone down in the last 20 years. Taking precautions to avoid confrontation, burglary is almost always a property crime despite being legally classified as a violent crime because of the potential to commit violence. Because people are more likely to be at home at night and there is a greater risk of alerting homeowners of their presence, the most common time for burglaries to occur is between 9 and 11 a.m. and from 1 to 3 p.m. Using techniques such as knocking on doors and presenting themselves as salespeople, asking for a person who doesn't exist, or putting a card in their front door to ensure nobody is home are all techniques that are used effectively by burglars. Thought to be acting on the desire to fulfill their expressive needs that they've developed through street culture that emphasizes partying, drugs, and alcohol, opportunities for burglary are attributed to an absence of capable guardians whose presence deters crime. Underprivileged crime, like shoplifting, however, has not followed the same decreasing trends, with about 1.4% of merchandise revenue lost to shoplifters. Shoplifters are typically between the ages of 11 to 21, which is reflected in the fact that there is an increase of shoplifting on non-school days, afternoons and evenings, and later in the week. Products like meat, cell phones, laundry pods, baby formula, and cosmetics are all popular items to steal because their resale value is most similar and almost the same as their retail value. Like other crimes, shoplifters are motivated by criminality, and opportunity, but there are motivations unique to the crime that do entice people as well. Many shoplifters are people who can actually afford whatever they were stealing, but who want to stretch their budget by supplementing their desired or needed objects. Another case is because they cannot afford the commodified designer version of something that they need, like shoes or pants, and prefer to steal it or have no choice but to steal it. People who steal express feeling a sense of thrill and excitement while also satisfying a desire for social acceptance. Organized crime. People who participate in organized crime are governed by a code of conduct concerning loyalty and secrecy that is enforced by a hierarchical structure. Despite having varying ethnicities, many organized crime participants live by similar guidelines. Crime families are responsible for smuggling heroin into the U.S., setting up methamphetamine markets, and cocaine smuggling. Despite differences in what they might deal in, these crime families specialize in just one or two forms of economic deviance each, staying in a certain area and operating within the same race to protect the crime family. Organized crime groups are not interested in small sums of money and choose more lucrative avenues such as stealing negotiable stocks and stealing carloads of merchandise from docks and railroads, among many other things. Practices such as protection racketeering is the mob's way of offering protection to a business that's been plagued by crime that the mob is actually facilitating. With this comes the issue of corrupt officials, because businesses who do not pay the fee for quote-unquote protection might soon find their businesses sabotaged by the mobs who are facilitating the crime and offering protection. Organized crime has a long-rooted history in America and has always been based off of ethnicity, especially starting with the Italian, most notably in the Italian mafia, which is the most powerful and longest established as far as common knowledge goes, that's had its run since the Prohibition in the 1930s. The federal government has achieved impressive results with the law enforcement efforts and have successfully put away many mob bosses, but the complete ruin of organized crime is highly unlikely, if not impossible.